Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to
Hello.
Marijuana Mind.
How's it going?
You're so
um,
out of like
I don't even know what to
you
say anymore. I'm like, marijuana, what
do you
is
remember
it?
how to
Oh
do
my.
this?
No, I don't remember, but I
Okay,
do
first
remember that I am Justin Davis,
you are
that,
just yeah,
that
nailed
you
it.
are Cynthia Brewer with some fantastic adjective that I would always put in front of you.
Yeah, you'd always make up some bullshit word that you came up with your thesaurus and your word of the day calendar. But
Yes,
yeah, you're totally out of practice,
I'm out
Dr.
of practice.
Davis. This is horrible. It's hilarious though. Is what you
And we have, wait, I just want to, we'll come back to you, but Trent Hancock, a very special guest is with us today. And it's going to be, I promise it's going to be a very interesting show.
It's
How's it
maybe
going?
too interesting. It's gonna be too salacious, Trent. Are you ready for
It
this?
might be. Yeah, looking forward to it.
I feel like Trent's a boat rocker, a feather ruffler, whatever you want to say.
Wait, he's in the porn industry?
No. Very contrary to popular belief, he is not in the porn industry. He's in the cannabis industry. And no, I'm saying he is that which ruffles feathers. He's like, like the mother of dragons, Khaleesi. Like Trent is, yeah, the bringer of fire. So everyone who's not familiar with Trent Hancock, he has been the one to really mess up this cannabis market with exposing some very interesting news recently. We are so lucky to have him on today. He is an Oregon business owner and founder of Creswell Organics, spelt very uniquely as O-R-E Organics. I love it. Out of Oregon,
Oh,
obviously.
out of Oregon.
Yeah,
Okay.
I know.
Yeah,
And it's a play on words. He's been growing weed since 1998, but legally since 2008 for sure. Published author, outspoken advocate, and activist. And joining us today with just so much entertainment in the both cannabis and testing world. We are so lucky to have you, Trent. Thank you for coming today.
I appreciate it. And thanks for the introduction.
Cynthia, before we start with Trent, though, is there anything that I missed or we should update people just in Florida? I know, for example, unfortunately, Nikki Fried did not fare so
Hallowed be
well.
thy name.
Yeah, so that we know that.
She did not win the primary, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Charlie Chris did. And I am not going to encourage our listeners to vote either way. I think you should vote how you feel. And really, I have absolutely no premise to even suggest anything. But I'm not a big fan of Chris. I'm not going to lie.
He does at least say that he is pro cannabis and pro recreational or adult use.
Yeah, but like at one time, he did say that he wasn't when he was a Republican, and he was responsible for putting people in jail for some of the harshest crimes in Florida's history. So I know talk is cheap, actions. If you feel like actions are going to be held more accountable with Mr. Chris, then yeah, I guess he's the candidate. But in my opinion, with the market the way it is, and we'll get into it, I don't know if we really need to be pushing a bunch of stuff to happen until we fix what's currently happening. So
Oh,
Daddy DeSantis is
income
perfectly
Santa.
fine, or Charlie Chris is perfectly fine. And this, at this point, I don't give a shit. That's how I feel. I want the best person to win, and I want the best person who gets the most votes to win. There you go. Is that a thing?
Yeah, you've really taken a strong position on this one, Cynthia.
Yeah, I'm very like, blah, whatever. So what else did you miss? We did a episode without you, which was incredibly weird, but very fun. And that was with Taras Batiste, ex-NFL player and cannabis author of Don't Let It Smoke You. And I left a copy of his book signed to you on your desk a couple weeks ago.
I mean, like that book?
That's the one on that very empty shelf that you just noted. He was amazing. His house, I want to post the video, but like his house in the background is just amazing. He
And I
has like
actually,
a table for 12.
I would love to come back and do an episode where we can discuss a little bit about what he discussed.
Well,
Not
like
me,
here's the thing,
obviously.
Justin. When you go on vacation to Morocco and then you leave me behind, and then you don't tell me we're not doing shows and very little content coming out of Morocco too, I have to assume that you've abandoned your position with me. So I had to carry on in your absence, and I did the best I could. We're not going to redo guest episodes.
Okay, I think I hear some violins playing in the background
No,
there.
I'm just saying I could do this without you. I can be solo. Just kidding. I don't want to do it without you. I'm kidding. I just we had, I mean, I had to take the opportunity and he was available. It was on a Sunday morning too.
Yeah, much appreciated by myself and I'm sure all of our fans and listeners.
Well, we had to give them something. You know, they're just
Absolutely. I'm not being
jonesing for
facetious.
some content. They just gotta have it. They just
Well-
need the content.
Well, speaking of content, we have a lot of content to cover for today. Trent, you've been in cannabis for a long time, and
Yeah.
and an
Yeah.
activist. You might even an activist for quite a while as well.
I feel like the activism part's more new, but the grower part of you has been like pretty prevalent since 98.
Yeah, I've been growing since '98 in Portland, and I've been an activist, I'd say, since 2011, where I actually started getting involved in regulations in the states. Worked on different laws in a few different states, and on my reservation, Pine Ridge, South Dakota, where some of my family's from, I helped them with writing the first small business law in the country. Yeah, I've been kind of around the block a few times, I guess you could say.
Well, I love that part of that seasoned cannabis industry professional of you, but let's start at the beginning. So like, I know that you've done a lot of other things. So how did you get into this industry? And then how did we get here today? And then we'll get into the down and dirty.
Well, I'll have to start that with saying that, I support it being 21 and over for cannabis, but I started at a way younger age. I've been in it since I was 14 in 1995.
A young entrepreneur, everyone.
Yeah, young entrepreneur, exactly. And that's exactly how I started. I mean, I wasn't even old enough to work in Oregon.
Or vote.
Or vote, do anything. But I had good connections in the cannabis world at a young age, so I was
You couldn't
fortunate.
even drive a car.
No, I couldn't even drive a car. I was running around with a backpack on and a pager, the old school days. But
Yeah.
A pager.
but
You were,
yeah, so,
you were legit. Okay.
yeah, I was totally legit. Yeah. And so, I went from that to learning what real quality was in the Portland scene. We had some incredible craft growers at the time. And Eugene, where I'm at now, it had some amazing growers. I called them advanced hippies because they're way ahead of their time at the time. I mean, they're telling me to eat organic and things like that. And I was like, okay, but your weed's amazing. Someone listen to you on how to grow. And but now the more I look back at it, the more I realize how far ahead they really were. But yeah, so I got into understanding like that cannabis grown right is incredible and can change your life. And
When did it become legal in Oregon? Because I know 95 was when things first started in California.
Yeah,
When did
98 we passed the first medical law,
Okay.
but it was decriminalized in the 70s. So we were able to sell bud just openly, and if the cops saw you, you'd make you dump your bags out unless you have too much, obviously, and things like that. I mean, it was an interesting environment to grow up in because it was pro cannabis in this community way before the rest of the country came online.
And you guys have continued that sentiment with the recent vote of like anything goes, nothing's really illegal anymore, just don't do anything stupid. It's not like everything's legal, it's just and encouraged. It's just like you can have a little bit of everything and it's okay. Like,
yeah, nobody's gonna go to jail for possession nowadays. So yeah, if you have possession but you're not distributing, you're okay. I mean, if you're
like a splash of like cocaine and like a dash of like MDMA, you're not going to get arrested, right?
Not at all.
Yeah,
no,
that's crazy.
not
Oregon,
even a charge.
Pioneers in the industry. Keep going. So what happened after you? I mean, I just picture you as a 14-year-old with a backpack, and I'm surprised your name isn't Derek, because that's most of the drug dealers with backpacks I knew when I was growing up.
How far did you go with that? So you said you started in 2011, you kind of made a little bit of a switch, but where were you, like, what was the trajectory to get there?
Okay, so basically I was selling cannabis and everything from 14 to 17, and that's when I became a grower. And it was honestly because I was inspired by the growers of that time period here in Oregon, and those were who we looked up to as kids. Like, we were like, that's who I want to be when I grow up. I don't give a shit if he's a felon, you know what I mean? Like, and so I was real passionate about cannabis because, like, for example, there was a lady with epilepsy in my neighborhood that we gave her some bong hits, just, because she would always hang out with us, and I knew the people that took care of her. And all of a sudden her seizures just stopped in their tracks. And so we kept giving her bong hits and couldn't tell everybody else that we were doing it. And I realized right then that cannabis was special and that everybody else was wrong and we were right, And so I kind of held
I love that story more
That
than
story
any
gave me
other
chills.
story. I know that story should be like, etched into someone's pillows. Bong hits for
yeah. Her name was Tina. Her name was Tina. She was in a wheelchair because she'd have grand mal seizures every day, like dozens and dozens of seizures. I don't even know how many. It'd be like every hour. All of a sudden, she'd stick her arms out, and it'd be clear she's in a full grand mal seizure. And when we started giving her bong hits, it went to like once a month she was having seizures. So we knew the cannabis was knocking her seizures out. And she just was an awesome person, and for that got me convinced that I didn't care if I was going to get in trouble. I was all in at that point.
So when did you start your professional career?
In 2008. So I ended up in Montana, where I got a cannabis felony in 2004, and I ended up on probation there when their initiative passed in November 2004. And it was the first state to allow businesses, because they basically took our Oregon law and they transitioned it where in Oregon and California, you can only have 3 patients, 3 card holders. And so that's 6 plants per year. So the biggest growers were like 18 plants, right? So where I grew up, everybody had garage grows and everything. It was just a small craft thing. And so when we went to Montana, and I realized quickly while I was on probation that it was going to be an enormous industry there. You had people with 800, 900 cards. I don't want to name names, but I was setting up grows for certain individuals that own magazines now. And at the time, I noticed real quick there was pesticides everywhere being sprayed on all these big grows, because the bigger the grow, the more they spray. So that's how I got into the whole testing thing.
And this is a good place to kind of to pause for a second and understand that, like, I'm going to ask you some key questions just because I know you can answer these on point. Is cannabis difficult to grow?
To do it right and to do true connoisseur quality, absolutely. I mean, it's something where once you tell people the trade secrets, they'll say, "Oh, that makes perfect sense." But there's a lot of misinformation right now.
Right.
Yeah.
So what if I said, is 3 plants difficult to grow? Is it difficult to grow 3 plants?
No, I would say you're going to have much higher quality as a small grower with no experience than a large grower with a lot of experience. So the larger the grow, the harder.
Yeah. Would it be fair to say that as companies scale, they come in contact with more and more?
I feel like he's on trial.
Well, no, here's what I want. Here's the thing that Trent and I have been talking back and forth for weeks now. And the one thing that my mind keeps going back to as he's getting into the testing part of his whole career, and why all of a sudden this became his focus, is pot is not hard to grow. And I'm telling that openly. Anyone can argue with me. It is not hard to grow a couple of plants safe, accurate, potent, like with love, care, and the attention that only 3 plants need. It's not hard. The novice can do it. The person without the green thumb can do it, because the plant is really, really strong and sustainable. You can put her through a lot and she's still going to come out clean on the other side. It's when you scale that all of a sudden you start shoving a bunch of plants, a bunch of these women into a room. You have to control all of these different variables, that pests and mold and all these things become a problem. Those are never a problem when you're small with just the plant. The plant's not the problem. People are the problem when they scale. So he has agreed with me in the past when we talked about this, that growing pot is super easy.
Absolutely.
Scaling safe pot is not. And that's why he found out that this is something.
And I want to add in, I was, as a physician on the physician side, I just want to add in that, it's one thing when you have contaminants, like even some pesticides that you're going to ingest orally, that you're going to eat, because we're made to eat all kinds of toxins. Our livers are made to take them out. But it's another thing when you're breathing it in, you're lighting it, and you actually create it into a vapor, and you breathe it and it goes directly into your lungs. it's much, much more dangerous. So you really can't compare, a pesticide that might be used on a fruit, for example, that doesn't get washed off properly to something that you're lighting and breathing in. It's a much more serious problem.
That's a very good point. And I would agree with both of you on the points you made. With a small grow, you are much easier to control bugs and mold without having to put pesticides on the plant. And as you scale up, the more it spreads like wildfire. And so we just started developing technology to prevent it, because number one, first, before health, I was a connoisseur. And I realized that spraying plants destroy the quality. And so for me, like, realizing when I got into medical, that these are people with serious health conditions that are coming to that's why we were the first commercial growers to write pushing for testing in medical cannabis, because a lot of people don't realize there was no testing until adult use cannabis, and medical wasn't really medical at the time because you don't know what you were smoking unless you were smoking your own. And yeah, so for us, we pushed hard for testing. We're really excited about testing when it came, and then found out all these problems we'll get into. So.
Right. So this is an interesting place. So obviously Trent's not new to the market. He's been here since the inception. He's helped to create language for different states. He was facilitating this whole program. And then obviously we're deficient in the testing aspect. And so, yeah, a lot of people don't know that there was no testing. Oops, like,
But it's medical though.
Yeah, it's medical. But then when adult use happens, they're like, maybe more people might get affected. So we should probably pay attention. And then, but we did get testing. But at this point in your career, where are you at? Where are you living?
I'm in Eugene, Oregon. We're just about 10 minutes outside of Eugene. We have a 36-acre property, indoor facility on it. And,
And you grow weed there.
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool.
Absolutely. Really good weed.
Really
But yeah, and so we were excited to get back into the Oregon market when adult use passed. We were really excited about testing. And then the chain of custody issues, we started realizing quick, because when I was consulting and setting up other grows, I started realizing we can present anything to the lab under a batch sticker. And if you look at chain of custody, it's completely compromised, because we can present anything to the lab takes samples, and then we can send anything to the dispensary knowing it'll never be tested again.
If someone, I just want to clarify what you're saying, just because I don't think everyone listening necessarily knows when you say chain of custody and things like that. Like,
okay, so
go ahead.
Okay, so basically, when we call a lab and have them come test the product, they'll use these sophisticated ways where they're going to pick from certain areas of the batch, but I'm presenting the batch to them. And a simple sticker determines the batch. So say I need a test result for batch 40, but I know batch 32 tests high and it's clean. I can present batch 32 to you under the sticker of batch 40.
Just put a sticker on it.
Yeah, just by a simple metric sticker. And then batch 40 gets a test result. I get an emailed test result back from your lab, and I can send anything to the dispensary under that test result. And it's just ridiculous. Like, if you talk to a crime lab chemist, they're going to say this is not real testing, because the person in question that you're supposed to be overseeing is in control of the entire process, basically. But yeah, I could go further into it if you.
Well, and I want you to, but I want to make sure that people understand that every market is different when it comes to testing regulations. So what Florida thinks is best practices is totally different from Oregon. So Oregon does not have a vertically integrated mandatory market. So the grower, which would be Trent in this case, is calling on the labs to verify and vet his product so he can sell it to a retailer. And so that's where he's talking that he's noticing these loopholes in the sampling process where so many people could be taking advantage, not his company, but like looking at the program, understanding the program for so long, he knows that this is probably something people are going to do in our industry. So in Florida, we test final product packaging, which is one SKU available to patients that hasn't made it to the shelf yet. We go and sample the entire batch that's already been packaged up for patients, and then we take that back and we give it the clean bill of health, and they're allowed to then take it to a dispensary. What Trent has is more loopholes, but every state has loopholes. Every state. there's no way to really like legitimize this process of sampling and keep it the integrity of it as long as laboratories are sampling product from their client, essentially, right?
And another issue I see is if since we are the client, you can't expose something about us to the public if you feel concerned for the consumer because of what you think may be happening at my grow. And that's a big concern to me, because I believe the consumer should have been the client basically through state agencies contracting with the labs, and so that they could actually be a true watchdog over us. And at the point we are at right now, they are in totally, basically they're submissive to us because they don't get the business if they don't play our games. And I'm not saying that all labs do it, but there is a lot of labs that are looking at this like, I'm not going to get business if I don't pull some shady stuff here. And so, you know, we're seeing right now over 50% THC test scores on flower in Oregon. And if you have a below 28% score, you can't even wholesale. And so like, that's where I'm at a point now where I'm ready to, you know, take on the whole industry if I have to, because it's all false. It's not, the consumers deserve better than this. And the cannabis community and original medical growers would have never tolerated this. And so, you know, I just want to see it fixed, basically.
So essentially what's happening across the cannabis industry nationwide is there are laboratories that are inflating values, inflating potency numbers. They don't really so much have to hide contamination, because that loophole is really articulated in the language of every market, like what they do think is a contaminant versus what they don't. Things are left off in certain areas, and there's all arbitrary reasons. But for your specific issue that you're having now, is you're a grower that's growing compliant, safe weed, but it's being tested lower than your competitors. And they're getting numbers as high as, I've seen 51% for a Bruce Banner. Are you kidding me?
It's ridiculous.
45%, 40%. And people don't seem to realize in Oregon that that's like not possible.
Yeah, and that's where the situation is so competitive here, because we have 1,300 farms and just 4 million people. So to put that in perspective, in Florida, that would be like Florida having what 6,000 farm license. So it's an enormous competitive market, and THC scores have gradually climbed as the competition got more serious, and it's gotten to the point where now it's just so out of control, it's blatant.
Oh, it's ridiculous. Like the numbers I've seen. So laboratories are competing for and this has happened in Florida significantly. There are 10 laboratories in Florida competing for 22 opportunities at business. Those are the license holders. Labs have been licensed very efficiently, but growers have not been licensed at all. So we're all competing for 22 opportunities at business. Much like in Oregon, these labs are trying to set themselves apart for your business, and they're just using this inflation of potency almost out of control. You can't even sell your non-inflated potency product to a retail environment, can you?
Yeah, I mean, it's bad enough where, you know, our experience isn't with growing the most. So we did own a dispensary in Montana, but we're really focused on growing because that's where I've developed technology to have really high quality cannabis. And so we invested completely in production and didn't realize that this was going to be happening. And so now, yeah, we're getting ready to sell a lot of our company just to get vertically integrated, because if we have a dispensary, we can show the consumer, hey, you know, those scores, you don't want to trust those scores, and just be honest with them. And but right now we're stuck in a wholesale position. So at this
you
point,
grow it and you sell it to the retailer after testing. So what you're going to do to survive is you're going to be the retailer and make yourself vertically integrated so that you have someone to sell to.
Yes,
like,
and that's
essentially give to. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's where my friends that are in the Oregon market that have, you know, grown up here, they've generations into growing, they're highly skilled. The ones that have dispensaries and are vertically integrated are doing amazing right now and kicking everybody's ass, you know.
That's great. That's awesome.
And for me, like, the way I see it is I didn't want to sell ownership to get a dispensary, but we're going to do it because we can then, you know, do the same thing they're doing and just teach the consumers what's really happening.
Instead of going under, you're just going to find a way to like get on top, you know, because Justin, I know you got questions. I see it on your face, your little Moroccan face.
Well, I mean, I understand the problem, what you're saying on the lab side about wanting to inflate the numbers so that they get the business. But it seems like you would also have a problem on the grower side in that if they know that they have samples that are not going to pass, or a whole, a crop that's not going to pass because of contaminants, whether it's molds or heavy metals, pesticides, why wouldn't they, and all they need is a little sticker, why wouldn't they just give the wrong sample or the wrong batch to the lab as well? So it seems like you'd probably would have growers complicit potentially as well if they don't want to lose millions of dollars of a
It's a
crop.
great point. Yeah, I mean, in that we're looking at growers that went and told investors they're master growers, right? Because I don't use that term, but they use the term. They call themselves masters and all that. But they went and convinced them that they're master growers, and now if their crops fail and they have to destroy those crops, they're going to lose their job. I mean, they're not like me where they own their own business. They're working for these big entities, and so it gives them a huge incentive to switch out batches. And the way I see it is the consumers, a lot of them have serious health conditions, and they're being told that testing is there to protect them, and so it needs to actually be that.
So that brings us to the most current event. So Trent's been, rocking the boat, very aware of the deficiencies in the program in his market and other markets, but how it adversely affects his direct company and as a company owner. And obviously this is a family business too that was started, and so you're trying to survive, but you see this big, like, industry-wide problem. And you decided recently to do something about it. And that's how I found you online, is because you cannot seem to stay out of my LinkedIn feed. You keep releasing information that is causing a lot of people to get up in arms or to get some really good information that they did not know. So what happened recently?
And I just want to say, wait,
really? Go ahead.
Also, he has a brilliant article that really,
that's what we're getting into
the article. No, I thought you were getting into the specifics of what he's releasing subsequent to that, but just in terms of letting people really understand the problem, it really breaks it down in a simple way.
That's very interesting for you to say. Okay, what I was gonna say, I was rudely interrupted by Moroccan Davis over here, is Trent decided that besides just being a business owner with a grudge and like hating the market and watching his company go down, that he was going to do something about it. So I know that you wrote your first article about bringing up these issues back in what, 2011 or 2015?
2015, March. I think it was March of 2015.
So what did you do?
Basically, okay, so I was consulting these big grows, and I was realizing they were spraying all the way up until the week before cut down, Avid or whatever, all kinds of different things. And so I wrote an article releasing it to a local magazine to let them know, as medical patients, people that have their cards in Montana, that there is no testing in cannabis, and that there's bug and mold problems that are being resolved with pesticides, and that you have to know your grower and know that they're not using these sprays and push for testing in cannabis. And so we showed High Times this article when it got published, and I believe 7 weeks later they published front page warning about the dangers of sprays and combusting sprays. And so that's kind of how it all started. Mm-hmm. And then when I got back into the Oregon market from Montana, because I was in Montana because it was the first businesses in the country that were large, and and so that's why I was out there in the first place. And then when I came back to Oregon, when I realized the problems with testing, I just kept going with it. So it's been a long fight. It's, I don't know how many, 7 years now.
So, but recently you've had a lot of traction. You've had a lot of content going up. It seems as if there's been a little bit of a fire lit around you to kind of let you just kind of go and see how much damage you can cause. It's good stuff though. It's good damage. I love it, because I feel like this is something that, like, all of us who are in the lab space are talking about it, but we can't talk about it. Like, we internally, it's something that's plagued us. If you're a good lab, you get punished. If you're a bad lab, you get to cash in. If you're an MMTC or like a grower, you can really exploit the market to your benefit, and you can shop around for whatever you want to get because someone's willing to give it to you.
We've been
But
talking about that for a while on the show for at least a year.
right, we've been talking about forever because it's always been something where it's like, why would you leave a company that's, if all of us are vetted exactly the same, all of us are just as good as one another, vetted by the same agency. Price is all competitive. Turnaround time is relative to volume, but pretty easy. Customer service should be on point, this girl right here. But then you get down to what can you set yourself apart from the rest of the group to get the business? Well, people just got creative, and we knew it, but there's nothing we could do about it because it's our market. But what Trent did is tell us a little bit about these RICO charges with laboratories and growers.
Okay, so that's where the traction started, and shout out to Luther. We don't always get along, but he filed some Arkansas lawsuit that was
Luther
RICO charges.
Sutter, right? That's the attorney representing the patients in Arkansas with the litigation against like 3 cannabis companies.
He's filed a lawsuit against the 1 lab there and 3 entities as conspiring basically to control the market, and that's why it's under RICO. And so a little bit about how all this traction started. I had a lab from New York that's working on regulations there that I was talking to in a meeting, and they said, what you're talking about here, the other labs need to know about. You need to get on LinkedIn. And so they told me to get on LinkedIn. I didn't know anything about even people being on LinkedIn, right? And I'm just not a networker type, really. And so
we're nerds. Anyone who's on LinkedIn, I'm a nerd.
So I got on LinkedIn and I just started talking shit. You know what I mean? I was like, this is bullshit. This is the blah, blah, blah. There needs to be major lawsuits. Consumers are at risk. I'm just telling all these. And so I got labs following me because they're like, who the hell is this guy? And so this was for 2 weeks, only for like 2 or 3 weeks. And then all of a sudden the Arkansas lawsuit hit, and I was warning of lawsuits coming. So it was just perfect timing. And
like
so
premonition.
Then, it was strange. It was like I got on LinkedIn, I started warning people, and then all of a sudden the Arkansas lawsuits hit, and then all these labs started reaching out to me all over the country. And they're like, I'm dealing with this in my market. I'm dealing with this in my market. And they're very similar issues. And it's the fact that they're all competing for our business. So if you're not doing the fudging of numbers, and I wouldn't even call it fudging, it's fraud, well, if you're not doing that, you're not going to get business. And I started actually feeling sorry for the labs themselves, because I was like, man, you're going through the same thing I am, because I can't sell my product because all the labs know that I'm exposing this. So they're not going to dare give me a false score. And so I'm sitting here getting like 24%ers, and these other guys are getting like 45, 50% THC. I can't compete with that. And since I've been a political activist for years, I've amended a lot of laws. I know how to move in that. So I just decided I'm going to go at the whole entire thing. And honestly, I didn't expect the traction that's came out of it. There's an enormous traction for it now. And as the consumer becomes aware, in my opinion, it's the biggest story in cannabis. I've said that for years, and to finally see it playing out is nice, because I feel like the consumers are actually going to get some protection here in a minute.
Yeah. So, I mean, you've got an attorney. I mean, it's not your attorney. Obviously, the group in Arkansas chose to take on that, cause themselves. And so it's not like Trent's not, financially or, commercially involved in the litigation that's happening in Arkansas or in some of the other markets, but like maybe the catalyst for someone to have the give a damn to actually go through with it, because you are exposing things across the country. It's not just your market, it's every market.
And that's what's interesting about it, because when you look at a lot of the lobbyists that wrote the regulations, they're representing labs and cannabis entities at the same time. And in my opinion, that was a complete conflict of interest, because they looked at the labs and said, okay, I'm going to write this in very high volume batch testing. And they used that to pass the legislature saying, we have to have every batch tested before it hits shelves for the safety of the consumer. And so the labs got what they wanted that we're lobbying. And it's not all labs, it's very specific, but the labs got what they wanted, very high volume testing, which I believe in. I believe in high volume testing. It has to happen just without us in the mix of it. And the cannabis entities on the other side of the coin, they wanted no transparency on test results. They wanted, if they did fail a test, it was between them and the lab, that they are the client of the lab. and all of the ways that right now, for example, in Oregon, with 1,300 farms and 6 years of testing, there's never been one cannabis bust where the public has been aware of sprays being used. And so the whole structure is so
You
the
guys
cannabis,
really know how to do it up in Oregon.
Yeah,
I mean,
put it
isn't that
right.
describing Florida to a T though? That's same
Well,
thing
we're
we've
gonna
been dealing
get
with.
there because I know you've been out of the country, but you're about to be in the fold.
Yeah,
Justin, your patience will pay off.
You remember the first time you came on the podcast, you were actually, it was a
Yeah.
different podcast, the Canna Guys. You came
Yes.
on as Cynthia Brewer, a guest from Kaitcha Labs. And this was, we had you on a few times because you were
Yeah.
so amazing and engaging. But
I was.
this
I
was
mean, I'm a
something-
delight for
but
sure.
This, this is something, she's a delight, but this is something that you were talking about and we were kind of going back and forth, forever ago. And even back then, you don't want to point any fingers, and you kept saying, well, we just have to hope that, like the dispensaries are doing the right thing and they've been growing and learning a lot. It's a learning process, but this is a problem for a long time.
It's a problem across the country, but it's been a problem. It's always been a problem because the regulations don't make it bulletproof. Nothing can be bulletproof. People are way too creative when they want to pull the wool. And the other part is when you get greedy, you get even more creative. It's like amazing how these people can come up with these amazing ways of just getting around the laws instead of doing it the right way. But at the end of the day, Trent is 100% right. When you do the right thing, you don't make money. You don't get to play. Like if Trent grows clean weed and he tests it and it's a 20%, and that's an honest 20%, he can't get rid of it because people that aren't doing the right thing are selling things that are more salacious to a buyer. And then reversely, I can't seem to get a good piece of the market share because if my lab does things the right way, those numbers aren't going to be very high. So if I want to stay alive in the industry, what do I do? Do I either start playing the game with the bad guys, or do I risk losing the company because we can't survive without customers? And we are reliant on the MMTCs for us to be able to stay alive. So no matter what, it's a hot mess that runs in a circle and it's got to be fixed. So what Trent's doing is actually really making a lot of noise about an issue that's been ongoing, and it's causing things to get done. Now, in Florida specifically, and this is what I reached out to you about, and I was like, I want to have you on the show immediately. This week, you did something in Florida that I thought was awfully interesting that caused a lot of people to get excited. You released on your LinkedIn, your brand new LinkedIn, LinkedIn novice over here, releases the Florida documentation around some of the laboratories that got punished for THC calculations. How did what kind of response did you get after those went up on your site?
It's been interesting because it's one of those things that is catching traction and going viral like really fast, and it's just different because I've been talking about this for so long and I couldn't get anything to get traction, and now it's like no matter what I release, it's just like going. And so I'm excited to see how that plays out and how the consumers respond to it. I think if the consumers realize what was going on right now, it would be an earthquake. And so I'm hoping that earthquake happens and we get some stuff fixed.
It looks like you're the most entertaining LinkedIn connection that I've got, because since I've been connected to you, you've released a story about Oklahoma's market that I didn't even know happened. And, it kind of got lost in the feed of Canna News. You released documentation about my market in Florida, which I think is really odd, but still very cool. And you've really opened my eyes about what's happening in other markets and what people are doing. So I feel like you've got a lot of traction. You're going to have a lot of fans and a lot of frenemies.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think definitely. You can handle it.
Yeah. I look at it like it's making some people upset, but honestly, they should have been on the right side of it in the first place. And as a small business, it's frustrating to see these enormous entities with large levels of funding for lobbyists, and they're not helping me on it. So I have no problem with big entities, but I mean, come on, guys, let's protect the consumers, you know.
Has any big MSO reached out to be a part of this like movement with you to support you?
Yeah, I wouldn't want to comment on it because
You don't have to get specific.
I don't like the way they reached out, so I turned it down. Yeah, but I've had a couple reach out, and sometimes
I feel like it's genuine.
I feel like the cannabis community would not take me seriously anymore if I took them serious.
Oh wow. Okay.
You know?
Very stealthy diversion there, but I like it. Yeah. No, we
Meaning
understand that you can't talk about the specific.
Like they offered you hush money essentially, or what did it, take a
No,
job
they
with
wanted
us and-
they wanted to head a consumer protection agency for
of
cannabis,
course.
and they wanted to fund it, and they wanted their entities to be behind it to look like heroes. And all they got to do is speak out and tell their lobbyists to take action on the loopholes. And we need to get the labs together to where the new regulations won't hurt the labs and where it'll actually be good for them. And so that's why when all the labs are reaching out, I'm saying, hey, let's all get at the table, figure out how to fix it. And I don't even care with the labs that we're doing some of this stuff, like, let's just all fix this shit, you know? And
yeah, I guess I think
ahead.
I would think to myself, like, okay, what if, you're this outspoken activist about, all the holes in testing that all of us already knew about, but we couldn't do shit about. So yeah, we're going to like reach out. We want to be part of it. Like I would love to be a part of it from the lab's perspective. But at the same time, I assume that my competitors would reach out too. So it's like, how do you go through the vetting process of all these people that contact you that want to be a part of this movement? And then turns out they're one of the bad guys. What do you do then? If they want to be on the up and up, obviously we would want to help them, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And
okay.
Something my stepdad always taught me, shout out to Tony Lockett, but he always I had to do quick one. But he always taught me to watch people's actions, and words don't mean shit. And so, I people can come to me, but I can see actions and what was happening in the prior. Like I told some of the attorneys that are trying to take this on that I won't work with cannabis entity groups that weren't speaking about it prior to the Arkansas lawsuit, because if you weren't trying to fix the problems before it got big, I don't know who you are necessarily. I mean, it's not that. I mean, I want everybody that's trying to do the right thing to be on the right side, but it's hard to know who's who. And it's a good question, because honestly, half the labs that have reached out to me, I'm not sure about. So
yeah, question. I bet your vetting process is pretty extensive on who. Yeah, I bet.
Oh yeah, I'm cross calling and I'll go ahead.
How complicit do you think most of the dispensaries have been that are, giving their products? They're basically lab shopping. They must have some idea that, they're going to get better results from one lab to another. Why would they
They're
switch
fully aware of it. If you looked on my Instagram, you'll see farms on my Instagram saying that dispensaries will tell them what labs to go to get the right results so they can sell their product. And
oh my God.
I actually shared some of those posts on LinkedIn, some of the comments. The guy that got the 51% actually commented on my Instagram when I posted about it and said that they accidentally entered it wrong into metric and you can't take the numbers back. And I said, no, that's bullshit. They could have fixed that number. And so it's silly. I mean, it's so ridiculous. But yeah, it's just interesting.
So it's funny because Trent is calling out these businesses on his own, but then making them be accountable for what they're doing, like making them justify a 51% Bruce banner, which we know is not possible. The fact that they even sell it, advertise it, or can literally like sell it to a consumer, a patient, is just beyond me. That the patient would be like, yeah, I'm smoking a 51% Bruce banner. Be like, no, you're just dumb. And because that's not a thing.
and his response was he has to feed his kids, but honestly I got to feed mine too, and so I'm not gonna commit fraud on consumers to do that,
Feed your kids with lies.
yeah.
So if we can't stop the dispensaries from going to any lab that they just want to go to and switch around, I guess the next best thing is to just make sure that the labs all have to play by the rules, and that there's not a big advantage of going to an inferior or
But
a
see,
lying lab.
how do you expect to do that? Because you're not in charge. The regulators are in charge, and it's up to them to regulate, or shout out Nate Dogg, 2Gs, regulators. But I'm saying, like, if they choose, like in Oregon's market, it seems like they have chose not to do anything about this, and that's blatant inflation. In Florida, they chose to do something about it. Our regulators are legit issuing fines for labs that are doing
I
shady
mean,
shit.
now they're doing it after years and years
Dude,
and years of
I'm
doing
just happy
nothing.
they're doing it. At this point,
Yeah.
I don't care how long. Look at Oregon. They're not doing it out there. Trent's having to step up, and they've been implemented for how long?
6 years we've had metric cameras, the whole nine, 90 days of footage, and that'll be their argument is, well, we'll catch it on the cameras, and it's impossible to catch someone switching a sticker at any given moment. You'd have to watch hours and hours of footage. It's ridiculous. It's impossible to catch.
How do they not catch the potency inflation?
To me, I don't want to say anything negative about
Okay.
the agency, but
No. You're right. You never want to dog your regulators but I'm saying, like, patience.
Isn't there a simple solution to this? If you had regulators that were employees, that were state employees, or by the agencies themselves that you're assuming are honest at least, and they could go in and just sample whatever they wanted, even off the shelves that are being sold, right? Wouldn't that just be a simple solution?
Where are they going to test it, Justin?
They have to have their own lab, their own independent lab.
That's not easy. Is cannabis testing isn't easy. That's why.
And it being federally legal also makes it so the state agencies don't want to be a part of the actual business part, like testing. But what I personally think is the regulations have to protect the labs that are already existent, because the current laws made it so all these private labs invested into their entities. Mm-hmm. And so, in my opinion, we need to remain high volume testing, but it needs to be a situation where the state agency has a software program that's saying you're going to go test these batches this week, and this is going to be next week you're going to be testing these batches, and they're getting paid directly from the state, but then the state's billing our farms. And what it would do is make the state stand directly in between the labs and the cannabis entities, so that there is no business relationship whatsoever. And we can still pay for the batches. I have no problem paying for testing, but that it needs to happen where the state agency, where if a lab whistle blows, we're not their client, so they can actually whistleblow and say, hey, there's something not right at this farm, and it's not a harm to their business. Because right now, if a lab truly wants to protect consumers, they're risking lawsuits from their own clients. Oh, yeah. And it's unbelievable. And so it's the structure itself that needs changed. And that's ultimately, like, I'm not involved in the lawsuits. I'm introducing people and helping them so lawsuits can go forward. But my ultimate goal is to force a change in regulations and make it where it's not hurting the labs. So it's all because we need a very high volume testing. We just don't need.
Yeah. So a dispensary would know in this scenario, and it sounds brilliant, is that the dispensary would no longer go and directly contract with the lab and say, oh, okay, can you test my stuff? They would just have to submit it to the state, or the state would actually go take it.
You can still have the lab sample. You can still have the lab pull. You just don't get. I would say Trent and I
would send in the lab and say, go sample this one, go sample this one, and. So how do you become a lab, though, in this scenario? Because it's really almost like you're being employed. The government is saying, how do they choose which lab is going to do
like what? For example, say you have 10 labs in your state. Okay, what I see is, say there's 800 tests that need to be happening a week, or we'll just call it a week. 800 tests that need to be happening a week. You should divide that up between the 10 labs, and it should be random which dispensaries they're testing shelves on, and It's not, basically they have no relationship with who they're going and pulling the sample from. Does that make sense?
It
Listen,
does make sense, except for how do you then, if there's 10 labs, well, what if there were 20 labs? Now there's half as much business for each one. And plus,
Yeah,
what
but
would make one lab incented to be superior to another lab or be able to thrive over another lab that
you
just
should
came on
never
board?
thrive over another lab. That shouldn't be your business model to be
that's,
like, I want it all.
yeah, and
There's plenty to go around. What he's saying is, and I get it, my lab is dependent. Our success is dependent on people wanting to work with us. And if they don't like the results we put out, we are watching them not work with us. Not because we did
It's-
something wrong, but because we did
exactly,
everything right. So
exactly.
it is very much the fox guarding the hen house when you've got
I wanted to say that.
somebody who is directly responsible for my success as a company being able to leave at the drop of a hat, even though we did nothing wrong except for
Yes.
give you exactly what we were supposed to give you.
Yes.
The truth is what costs us money and what could ruin a company. He's talking about eliminating the relationship where you get fired for being honest.
No, I get it. I
Creating this-
totally agree with that.
But I
Except-
like the whole creating the state random like
Mhm.
assignment sampling. And then the bigger your operation is, obviously you get more sample opportunities because you have the higher throughput and you can handle the volume. At the same time, I think one of the biggest things we could do immediately would be all sample results should be sent to the state and then they give them to the client. Because the second you have to break bad news to a client is when you have to start wondering whether or not you're going to keep your business open.
Yeah, and
Bad
if I'm a reporter and I'm trying to find, say, the farms that are not doing it right, I can't. It's impossible. And so there needs to be a public results where right now, for example, I've never failed one test ever once in 6 years of testing, and that doesn't do me any good because everybody that's failing tests, nobody knows. So I can say I'm not failing tests, and they can say the same thing, and it doesn't even matter. And so the thing is the whole point of having testing is to protect the consumer, and it's out the window right now because the consumer doesn't even have a seat at the table.
And they don't get transparency with the results regardless. So like,
Yeah.
what is the point of issuing a COA that vets a product if the patient never has access to it?
Or can't see ones that didn't pass before.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, as far as like COAs that don't pass, like what's the benefit of a patient seeing that?
It's huge because right now, as a grower, I can tell who has real good grow systems and who don't by who's passing and who's not. And so if you have a failed test, that means you're spraying, whether you're passing the other tests, you're still spraying. And
well,
that's
what if it was like
important.
micro? Like a contamination, like a microbiological contamination? Would it be?
Then that's an environmental problem too.
So-
Go ahead.
So like the practices, so it would be beneficial for patients to know who has the hiccups in their process and then who doesn't, and they can make a decision based off of the history of someone's testing.
exactly.
Okay, I get it now. I get it.
Exactly.
So, I mean, obviously you've got a lot of attention the past couple of weeks, this week specifically, from, all the stuff you're releasing about these different markets, and really just not having a filter, I think, is the best quality that you have, because you're not affiliated with a single entity. You're your own founder and business owner. You have no affiliation with any laboratory, you have no affiliation with any MSO, any politicians, any attorneys, nothing. You are completely an island, and you decide to take on the entire cannabis industry.
Yeah,
Wow.
I mean, I don't really feel like I have a choice, because it's either cheat or take everybody on, and I'm cool with that. If it takes that to get it done, I just want to see it fixed.
Well, it looks like you're making a lot of movement. I feel like we can talk forever with you. I'm surprised the hour went so fast. So what's going to happen next? I want you to be able to plug your farm and your operation. Tell patients, because we do have a lot of listeners in Oregon. The analytics are over there. I know Bend, Medford are the top two. And then Eugene is on there, and Salem, Portland for sure. So tell people where they can buy your medicine if they want safe, clean, accurate, very good, high quality connoisseur weed.
Absolutely. I would say the Fifth out in Hillsboro. Shout out to them. They're one of the ones that know, you know, you don't have to have the high THC scores. You just got to educate the consumer. Right now, we just got investment in, and we're holding our product by our own dispensaries. So we're getting ready to fully supply our own dispensaries. And so look for Crater Enterprises. Crater is the name of our genetics. It's based off of Crater Lake here. It has some of the purest water on the globe, and you can't even drive a boat across it. It's, you know, that pure water. And so we named our genetic line that we're breeding off of that, just because the same principles. We want to keep it pure, you know. And yeah, I mean, for us, Creswell Oreganics, you can find us on Instagram, and Trent Hancock if you're on LinkedIn. Definitely come check it out.
Awesome. So to everyone, all of our listeners out there in the Pacific Northwest, those are my homies, my pasty people. Yes, because I hail from there, Gig Harbor, Washington. Keep an eye out for Trent and all the stuff that he's doing. He's definitely getting some traction. We'll keep an eye on that Arkansas case with those RICO charges, because that's just plain great entertainment at this point.
I have more stuff coming out of Florida too, just so you know. I'll let you know. So.
Oh, great. Oh, great. Okay. So I'm just going to say now, it's really poor taste to like release stuff about a podcast host's lab. If I'm okay. All right. So
no, just kidding.
I'm safe. Okay. No, our lab does the
You've
right
always
thing.
been on the up and up, right?
Well, we're on the up and up. It just doesn't make us the favorite. It just makes us the one that's like the most honest as we,
Right, and haven't
go
you
down in flame. No.
hasn't your lab lost a lot of business, you know, from dispensaries to
As much as
competition?
I don't want to have to talk about that type of stuff, our company has been hit pretty bad by like lab shopping. I mean, it's just the nature of the beast. We have to either succumb or, you know, keep fighting. Obviously, James and Chris built a company, built an empire based off of not being financially like dependent on these growers. I mean, obviously we need them to survive, we need them to thrive, but also good proper business planning has kept us, you know, from having to be a casualty of the industry that we work in. We've lost a lot of clients. And
I would like to mention though, you have a lot of other labs that respect your lab throughout this.
That's good.
Throughout the country, in the places that you are at, the labs that are reaching out that are honest labs always say, oh, that's the other honest lab in the state. And so you have a really good reputation with the other labs. So I want to throw that out.
That makes me feel good. That, I mean, that's what matters the most, is because like if anything ever came up, if a letter was ever issued to Kaija Labs, you know, that's going to affect not just Kaija Labs in Florida, but it'd be Kaija Labs in Oregon and California. And we can't run the risk of having our entire network affected by some bad behavior. So we are always really diligent about doing the right thing. It just doesn't make us the most popular lab. It actually makes us like the most hated lab, I think, sometimes.
It'd be nice to be rewarded, you know, to do the right thing as opposed to being rewarded for doing the wrong thing.
I think it's not so much about personal reward for the company as much as James, Chris, myself, we want to make sure patients are safe. That's why we started, you know, this whole entire thing. That's why we got into this industry. It wasn't because we wanted all of the everything, all of the money, all of the business. It's because we wanted to make sure that patients were getting what they deserve. The most vulnerable people in our population are utilizing this plant, and we need to make sure it's safe. It's my grandfather or my daughter or my cousin, you know, and that's what we give a shit about. So there's plenty of business to go around, but there's not a lot of integrity tied to it, unfortunately. But I mean, I'm glad what you're doing. It's getting the traction it deserves, and you have our support. I can't wait to see what else you release about Florida, because I'm gonna get the popcorn. Just
where can everyone see what you're releasing? Is that on your LinkedIn?
Everywhere, because it gets released on LinkedIn, and then it gets picked up by like the news.
Yeah,
and then
MJ
all of a sudden on Instagram and Twitter.
Yeah, it's on Forbes. I mean, Forbes did an article on everything that's going on. Leafly is doing articles with a lot of the people I'm talking to. And basically the labs are finally speaking out all over the country. So there's a lot of articles that are just gonna keep coming. I think the wave is just starting.
Okay, you probably won't tell me, but where do you get your info from? Like, how do you get this information? You're not going to tell me, are
Yeah,
you?
I don't tell anybody, but at the end of the day, my main goal is, because I have no financial interest in the labs whatsoever. My main goal is to create an honest market where the labs and us can thrive and not have these weird fraudulent games being played. You know, I've always wanted to be a professional in my industry as far as cannabis, and I was really excited about adult use and testing and our equipment we've developed, and so it became like this weird game that I'm like tired of. You know, I want to see it become a real professional situation.
You want the playing field to be level and even, and then you can compete based off of your product and not off of your paperwork.
Exactly.
Is there any, do you plan to, or is there anyone that's going to do this for the dispensaries as well to keep them honest?
You know, I think as far as the dispensaries, if we had the extraction and the processors where they're being, you know, properly policed, or I don't know how you want to word it, then the dispensaries kind of have to fall in line, because they're going to be getting real test scores regardless.
Mm-hmm.
I think that that's really important, is to make sure that the consumers are aware of terps and their importance in the fillings and euphoria. And you know, I've had some beautiful cannabis that's 18% but 3% terps, and it's just way better than, you know, some 25% with no terp type. And you know, I don't know how to explain it.
I think that really brings back to the point you were saying, what we were both saying, that it's important for the public to have access to all of these lab results, including the failed ones, because that's really what's going to show people if the dispensaries, you know, are they on the up and up. If they're failing multiple tests, then, you know, they're going to be incented to, obviously not, if they know that people are going to see all these results, they're going to try to really truly, you know, be the best in the industry, and that's going to help everyone, especially the consumers.
Absolutely.
And also, there's holes in that process, right, Trent? If a dispensary knows that patients are going to see everything, they're going to present you with the stuff that does not go public. The pristine, right?
Yeah, I mean, the dispensaries at the end of the day, they're in a kind of a unique position where they're the ones with that relationship with the consumer. So they're not really, a lot of them, unless they're vertically integrated, they don't have products themselves. And so if the dispensaries understand that these labs are failing, or these processors are failing their tests, they'll be the ones to cut it off before it gets to their consumers. So having, you know, for example, right now, a failed test isn't, a dispensary won't know. If I'm a farm and I'm trying to sell them product, they won't know about those failed tests that I'm having.
Yeah, I'm coming from the perspective of Florida, where it's vertically
integrated.
So I'm talking about the producers, I guess, and the processors, which in Florida are the dispensaries.
Yes, so in Florida specifically, if everybody got to see the good, the bad, the ugly, patients would be able to make decisions on what they want to medicate with a more informative, like, you know, mindset. Yes. In other markets, the dispensary, the end result retail sell to patients person could choose not to buy from a grower because they keep failing, even though they are presented with something that is passing. That's their choice.
And a failed test result would be so damaging to a large entity that's exactly why it's not transparent right now. And so my whole goal is to create the transparency. I'm real confident we'll never fail a test. So, you know, I want to make sure there's real transparency in a fair game, you know?
Yeah. Well, I can't wait to see what happens next. I am very eager to find out, because we're going to have him on again, because I have a feeling that there's going to be some more boat rocking, more lawsuits coming out of different markets. I think California's got one brewing. The rumor mill. We got different markets taking stances. We're going to see which ones actually come to fruition. I mean, the RICO charges are crazy amazing to think that that's something that could be filed, a conspiracy to commit a crime with a cannabis company and lab. So we'll be watching Arkansas. We'll be watching you, Trent. We will be watching
California for sure. California
will be
about to hit.
spying on your LinkedIn, trolling all of your socials to make sure that we get like the information first. And just know that we have, you know, you're welcome back anytime. We have the people listening that I think will really benefit from everything that you've said. And I'm hoping that they'll make good decisions when they, and ask those good questions when they go to the dispensary. And if you ever need to come back on to kind of vent or get rid of some info, just come on the Marijuana Mind.
Hey, thanks for having me on. And yeah, next time maybe we can talk about CHS and all that fun stuff.
I do want to talk about CHS because your experience in that is significant. And I know that what you're doing now will definitely change and alter that industry. I feel like this will be part one of many. And we'll schedule him for another one.
Yeah, and I want to, sincerely thank you, because what you are doing is really one of the most important things that anyone has done in this industry to help to protect the consumers, the people that are actually using it. So that's super important. As a physician, dealing with patients, you're the kind of person that we need out there.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that, and look forward to being on your show again.
Awesome. Well, it was a pleasure to have you. This is Cynthia Brewer signing off for the Marijuana Mind. J-Dog, your turn.
Keeping it lean, keeping it green as always, back in stateside. Happy to be here. Thank you again.
Bye, y'all.
Bye-bye.